I'm Dave, and I want to welcome you back here to the YouTube channel for mygunvalues.com. And this is episode 2 of our discussion of 19th century Winchester lever guns and a brief history of them. And we'll get up to the point where we can actually shoot this Winchester 1892. So, when I left off in the last episode, we were discussing Winchester's problem that came about in 1881. Americans have always loved big, powerful rifles. Back then was no different. In 1881, a company called Marlin, you may have heard of them, came out with what today collectors call the 1881 lever action. It was chambered in the 4570 government cartridge. Much more powerful than anything the 1876 could handle. You couldn't make the action long enough or strong enough to handle the 4570 cartridge. So Winchester started losing market share to Marlin. Had a real problem. Well, in 1885, Winchester found a solution. They happened upon a young man by the name of John Moses Browning. If you're in the firearms circles, you've heard of John Moses Browning. It started with the 1885 single shot, but Winchester, he provided them the solution for Marlin's inroads into their business model with the 1886 Winchester, which was really the precursor for the next for that model and the next two. The 1886 could chamber, I believe it was chambered in 10 or 11 cartridges, all the way from, I believe, 33 WCF was the smallest one, up to, I believe, the 45 110 450, which 450 was the weight of the bullet that it could shoot. I believe that was the biggest one. There might have been a 50 in there. Might have been a 50 110 350. But anyway, the 1886 was pretty much the 1892 is pretty much a shrunk down version of the 1886. With the 1886, the toggle link was gone. Now, when you pulled the lever down, you can see these two twin locking lugs right here on the back of the bolt. When you pulled that down, the locking lugs pulled out of these grooves you see here on the bolt. Okay. As you can imagine, having this steel lockup assembly in here made this a really strong system. Made the 1886 capable of handling just about anything you could throw at it within reason. So, the 1886 came along just about the time another issue cropped up. That was the advent of smokeless powder. Black powder, been around for, at that point, 500 or 600 years in the European theater. I believe the Chinese invented it at about 1000 AD. Black powder definitely had its issues. It was messy. It ate firearms. It fouled barrels. There was just a lot of issues with black powder. So scientists have been working for decades on smokeless powder, which would do away with black powder's fouling tendencies. And again, you wouldn't get as much smoke out of the ammunition, because when you fired a black powder volley, you couldn't see for several minutes if the wind wasn't blowing. You had to wait for all the smoke to blow out. So that smokeless powder was invented in the mid-1880s, I believe 1886, in France. They tried to keep it a secret. Didn't take long for it to make the worldwide transition. And just like when the self-contained cartridges came into being, in the 1850s, and you had to walk before you could crawl, smokeless powder, they had to start out with smaller cartridges because the stuff was not nearly as refined as what we have today. It was corrosive, it was erratic, they couldn't control the burn rate on it real well, but it was still a step up from black powder. So, Winchester chose to start out with its 1873 cartridges. Now the 1866 The 1873 and the 1892 all share the same family of cartridges, whereas the 1881, 1880, or excuse me, the 1876, 1886, 1894, and 1895 all chambered different cartridges. I have here the 3220 round, which is what this is chambered for, and you can see there's a slight bottleneck here in the case. This is a 3840 round. Again, you see the bottleneck right here. The 4440, which I don't have an example of handy, also had a very slight bottleneck, and then the 2520 was this case, just neck down to 25 caliber from 32. But what Winchester wanted to do was they wanted, everybody was scrambling to come out with the new smokeless powder, the new smokeless ammunition. Everybody wanted the newest whiz-bang thing. Problem was, we're back to the 1873 toggle link action. Couldn't produce it in, it could, I shouldn't say couldn't produce it. It couldn't be made to handle the pressures of smokeless powder. The action just was not strong enough. So, again, enter John Moses Browning. He miniaturized the 1886 action, and it was able to handle the pressures of smokeless powder in these cartridges versus black powder. And that's why you have 1873 and 1892 rifles, both chambered for the same family of cartridges, but the original 1873s are nowhere near as strong, so you cannot load them anywhere near as powerful as you can the 1892s. Now the 1892 also later on came out, it was loaded with the 2520, and it was also loaded with, much later, with the 218B. And 218Bs, while we're on the subject, if you ever find an 1892 chambered in 218B, find the nearest expert, because they're very, very rare, very, very valuable weapons. There have been fakes made, and just buyer beware on 1892s chambered in 218B. So, in part 3, what we're going to do is we'll finish the brief history of the Winchester lever guns, and then we'll take this thing out and actually shoot it. But, I just wanted to reiterate, the only reason this rifle exists is it's lighter, it's stronger, and it was made to handle the smokeless powder pressures that the 1873 couldn't handle. So that gave Winchester, that in. Now, if you look at history and you look at our website, you'll find the 1873 continued on in production much past the introduction of the 1892. And a lot of people wonder why that is. Well, I'll start off there in episode 3, and we'll tell you why the 1873 continued on in production for another, let's see, what was approximately 21 years after the introduction of the 1892. We want to thank you for watching, and we'll be back with you shortly.